Have you ever had someone look you right in the eye and tell you that your life, everything you've built and sacrificed, amounts to nothing? That's what my daughter-in-law, Chloe, said to me. She stood in my own kitchen with her designer handbag and a smile that didn't reach her eyes and told me I should be grateful she was giving me a purpose. She said, "Eleanor, you're retired. You just sit in this big, empty house all day. You do nothing." And then she demanded I drop my entire life to watch her 2 children for a week while she went on a luxury girls' trip to Bali. She was so confident, so sure I'd just say yes. She never, in a million years, expected the move I was about to make. She thought I was a pushover, a sweet little old lady. But when you push a woman who has spent a lifetime building silent strength, you better be ready for the earthquake that follows. This is the story of how I went from doing nothing to taking back control of my family, my time, and my legacy. The silence in my house after Chloe left that day was a different entity altogether. It wasn't the peaceful, companionable quiet I had cultivated over the 8 years since Arthur passed, the kind filled with the soft rustle of book pages, the gentle hum of the dishwasher completing its cycle, the distant song of a cardinal in the magnolia tree outside my window. No, this silence was heavy, thick and cloying, poisoned by the venom of her words. You do nothing. They didn't just echo, they seeped into the very grain of the wooden floors Arthur and I had refinished ourselves 30 years ago. They mocked the walls lined with framed photos, a lifetime of captured joy and faded colors and genuine smiles. They slithered around the shelves of books I'd curated over a 40-year career as head librarian, each volume a world I had helped both children and adults discover. They diminished the vibrant, sprawling garden I nurtured beyond the kitchen window, each bloom a testament to patience, care, and the quiet faith that something beautiful will grow if you just give it enough time and love. At 68, I had earned my peace. It wasn't an empty piece, it was a full one, woven from the threads of a life richly lived. After the initial gut-wrenching grief of losing Arthur, the man who had been my anchor and my laughter for 45 years, I had found a new rhythm, a melody that was solely my own. Tuesdays were for my book club, a lively, opinionated group of women who had been dissecting literature and life for 2 decades. Thursdays, I volunteered at the local library, reading to preschoolers, their wide-eyed wonder a balm to my soul. Sundays often meant lunch with Michael, Sophie, and Liam, a tradition I guarded fiercely. I thought I had navigated the tricky waters of the mother-in-law relationship with grace. I thought Chloe and I had found a mutual, if somewhat distant, respect. Chloe was a force of nature, meticulously manicured. She had blown into Michael's life like a hurricane a decade ago, all sharp edges, ambitious energy, and a relentless drive for more. She came from a world of fast money and faster connections, a world Arthur and I, a librarian and a high school history teacher, had never been part of and had never desired. Our wealth was in knowledge, in shared laughter over a poorly cooked meal, and a home filled with love and the faint, pleasant smell of old books and fresh-baked bread. But she made Michael happy, or so it seems from the outside. He was dazzled by her confidence, her worldliness, and she had given me 2 beautiful grandchildren, Sophie and Liam. For that, I was eternally grateful. I learned to overlook her occasional condescension, her subtle remarks about my quaint house with its outdated floral wallpaper, or my simple life. I chalked it up to a generational divide, a different set of values I didn't need to understand, only accept. But that day, the mask had slipped completely, revealing a profound and chilling contempt beneath the polished surface. She'd arrived unannounced, a whirlwind of expensive perfume and self-importance, her BMW SUV parked haphazardly in my driveway, blocking my view of the petunias. "Eleanor, thank God you're home," she had said, not waiting for an answer, before sweeping past me into the kitchen without an invitation, her designer handbag, a brand I recognized from magazine ads as costing more than my first car, dangling from her forearm like a weapon of social status. The girls and I are flying to Bali for a week, a spiritual wellness retreat. It's a crucial investment in myself. You understand, for my personal brand. Networking is everything. Bali? That sounds far, I had said, somewhat lamely, my mind racing. A week? The children? My carefully planned week of reading, gardening, and the library fundraiser committee meeting? It's exactly what I need to recenter. The energy there is just pure. Michael is swamped with that new software launch, so he's useless, completely checked out, which is where you come in. She finally looked at me, her gaze a physical inventory sweeping over my comfortable cable knit sweater and worn but cozy slippers with barely concealed pity. We need you to watch Sophie and Liam. It's perfect, really. It'll give you something to do. I mean, let's be honest, Elle. You're retired. You just sit in this big empty house all day. You do nothing. This will be a purpose for you. The sheer, unvarnished audacity of it left me speechless. It was as if she had taken a bucket of icy water and thrown it directly into my soul. My 40 years of shaping young minds in the hushed sanctuary of the library, my decades of building a home and a family with a good man, my quiet resilience in the face of a widowhood that had forced me to rebuild my entire world, all of it was reduced, in her eyes, to nothing, a void. A blank space on a calendar waiting for her to scrawl her demands upon it. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, a flush of shame and anger so intense I thought I might faint. But then something remarkable happened. As I stood there, absorbing the insult, a strange, cold calm began to settle in my heart, crystallizing the hurt into something far more potent and durable. Resolve. Arthur used to say I had the patience of a saint, but the strategic mind of a grandmaster chess player. He'd seen the fire beneath my quiet exterior, the sharp intellect I often masked with a soft smile to make others feel comfortable. He was the only one who ever truly knew that my silence was never empty. It was observant, processing, calculating. Chloe had only ever seen the quiet. She mistook my gentleness for weakness, my contentment for passivity, my fulfilled life for an empty one. She thought I did nothing. She was about to find out just how much this nothing was worth. The plan didn't form all at once. It unfolded over the next 48 hours, a quiet, meticulous blueprint for reclamation drafted in the deepest hours of the night. With a cup of chamomile tea steaming beside me, its gentle aroma a stark contrast to the storm brewing in my mind. This wasn't about petty revenge. That was too small, too fleeting, beneath me. This was about demonstrating value in a language Chloe might finally understand. Consequence. It was about teaching a lesson in respect, not through raised voices, but through unimpeachable action. It was about protecting my son and my grandchildren from a worldview that saw people as utilities and love as a transaction that could be negotiated. The first part of the plan was simple, born from love. I would give the children a week they would never forget, a week of unregulated joy and discovery. I would show them a different version of life, one not dictated by schedules and screen time quotas, but by curiosity, spontaneity, and unconditional, freely given love. The second part was born from a cold, gnawing suspicion that had taken root the moment Chloe dismissed my life's work. Her casual disrespect for the non-monetary value of a life hinted at a profound character flaw. Her obsession with status, the constant upgrades to cars and kitchens, the name-dropping of brands and influencers. It all felt fragile, like a gilded shell over a hollow core. If she could so easily dismiss the intangible wealth of a life well lived, how was she treating the tangible assets of their marriage? Michael, brilliant and kind, was also financially naive. He lived in the abstract, beautiful world of code and algorithms, trusting Chloe completely with the real world matters of money. "She's got a head for this stuff," he'd always say, with a dismissive, almost proud wave of his hand. My gut, however, the same one that had guided me through 40 years of selecting the perfect book for a troubled teenager, told me a very different, more terrifying story. When Saturday arrived, I felt a sense of grim purpose. I packed a small bag with a few changes of clothes, my favorite jasmine tea, and a folder containing my most important documents: my will, my investment portfolio summaries, and the deeds to my 2 rental properties. I drove my 10-year-old, impeccably maintained sedan across town to Michael and Chloe's sprawling, impeccably decorated McMansion. The contrast to my own cozy, lived-in home was always jarring. It was all cold marble, sharp angles, and furniture that looked more like modern art than something you'd actually curl up on to read a good book. The chaos was palpable. Glossy hard-shell luggage was piled by the grand entrance. Chloe, wearing a matching silk travel set, was barking orders at a hurried-looking Michael while simultaneously arguing with someone on her phone about VIP lounge access. "Mom, thank you so much for this." Michael pulled me into a brief, distracted hug. He looked exhausted with deep shadows under his eyes. "I'm just buried at work, and this trip came up so last minute, I owe you one." "Of course, dear," I said, patting his back firmly. My eyes met Chloe's over his shoulder. She gave me a tight, triumphant smile, the smile of a queen who has just secured a favorable treaty with a lesser nation. "The schedules are on the fridge," she reiterated, finally ending her call. "And remember, limited screen time. I've pre-approved a list of educational shows on the tablet. Their meals are all prepped and labeled in the fridge. Just follow the instructions. It's all very simple." The condescension was a barely veiled pat on the head. "I'm sure we'll manage just fine," I said, my voice as serene and unreadable as a placid lake, hiding the turbulent depths beneath. The moment their car disappeared down the winding driveway of the cul-de-sac, the atmosphere in the house transformed. The oppressive, performative perfection lifted like a suffocating fog. 7-year-old Liam and 10-year-old Sophie looked at me, a little lost and adrift in the sudden, sterile quiet, like 2 bright flowers potted in concrete. "Grandma," Sophie asked, her voice small and tentative, "do we really have to practice violin for 45 minutes every day? It's so hard, and my fingers hurt." I knelt down, my knees giving a familiar creak, bringing myself to their eye level. "How about we make a new schedule, just for this week? We'll call it Grandma's Rules." Their eyes widened in curiosity, a flicker of hope breaking through their programmed reserve. "Rule number 1, I announced with a conspiratorial grin. "We follow fun." And so we did. We ceremoniously ignored the laminated, color-coded schedule on the stainless steel fridge. The pre-approved, nutritionally perfect meals stayed in their hermetically sealed glass containers. Instead, we made pizza from scratch, and I let them knead the dough until flour dusted the ceiling, the countertops, and their delighted, giggling faces. We created silly face pizzas with pepperoni eyes, mushroom noses, and cheesy mustaches. We built an epic, sprawling blanket fort in the living room that consumed the entire first floor, using every cushion and throw we could find. And we ate our pizza inside it by flashlight, telling spooky stories that always ended in helpless giggles, not fears. We went to the library, my library, the smell of old paper and polish like a homecoming, and I told Sophie she could check out any book that looked interesting, no matter how silly or fantastical or below her reading level. The sheer, unbridled freedom on her face was a sight to behold as she piled dragon stories and space adventures and graphic novels into her arms, her choices her own for the first time. We went to the park, and I bought a cheap, simple kite from a nearby drugstore. I realized with a pang that they had never flown one before. I showed them how to feel the wind, how to let the string out bit by bit, and Liam's shout of pure, unadulterated joy when the kite finally caught a current and soared into the vast blue sky was a sound I will cherish forever, a melody of pure childhood. We stayed up past bedtime reading aloud from Sophie's new books, their heads nestled against my shoulders, and we talked about the constellations I pointed out through the skylight in their playroom. And I told them stories about their father when he was a boy, the time he tried to dig a hole to China in the backyard, the frog he hid in his lunchbox, the way his face would light up when he finally understood a difficult math problem. I was not a babysitter following instructions. I was a grandmother pouring love, magic, and a sense of unregulated wonder into them. And they blossomed before my eyes. Their laughter, real and unself-conscious, filled the sterile, echoey house with a warmth and life it had been desperately, achingly missing. But while we were having our daytime adventures, I was also quietly, methodically executing the second, more serious part of my plan. A plan Chloe, in her wildest, most narcissistic dreams, would never have imagined me capable of. That gnawing worry in my gut had become a full-blown siren. Her disregard for my life's work suggested a profound character flaw. If she could so easily dismiss the intangible value of a life well lived, how was she treating the tangible assets of their marriage? One evening, after the kids were tucked in bed, exhausted and happy, their breaths even and peaceful, I sat down at the family computer in Michael's minimalist, almost sterile home office. I knew the password. They kept it taped inside a kitchen drawer for emergencies. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This felt like a profound violation, and it was. But I framed it in my mind as a necessary surgery, a risk assessment to diagnose a life-threatening illness in my family. I started with the obvious. Her email was logged in. A quick search for Bali brought up the confirmation emails. My breath hitched. The spiritual wellness retreat at a resort called The Sanctuary had cost just over $20,000 for 1 week. I found receipts for a personal stylist who charged $400 an hour to help her curate her travel wardrobe, and another for a life coach at $500 an hour. Credit card statements flashed on the screen, each one a fresh horror story of extravagant spending. $1,200 for a single dinner, $800 for a non-toxic facial, and multiple charges to high-end boutiques, all while the balances hovered perilously near their limits, the minimum payments a ticking time bomb. This was reckless, wanton spending, but I feared it was only the glittering surface. I needed to see the foundation, the structure of their financial life. With trembling fingers, I navigated to their bank's website. The password was saved. When I clicked on the savings and investment accounts, my blood ran cold, a freezing river of dread. The joint savings account, which should have held a healthy six-figure cushion from Michael's lucrative career, was down to a paltry $15,000. It was nearly barren. The investment portfolio was a graveyard of bad decisions and delusional optimism. I opened PDF after PDF, my horror growing with each click of the mouse. Chloe hadn't just been spending. She had been gambling on their future on a staggering, incomprehensible scale. There were records of massive $50,000 and $100,000 transfers into speculative, high-risk cryptocurrency schemes with flashy, ridiculous names like Moonshot Token and Galactic Coin. I looked them up. Their value had plummeted over 95%, charts showing a near vertical dive into worthlessness. Then there were the angel investments in unvetted tech startups run by charismatic charlatans. One company,
VitaPure, promising a miracle algae-based supplement that could cure aging, had absorbed over $200,000 of their savings before it was exposed by the FDA as a complete sham, its founders now facing SEC charges and a slew of lawsuits.
The investment prospectus was full of pseudoscientific jargon and stock photos of healthy elderly people laughing. Another, a green crypto token promoting carbon neutrality, was virtually worthless, its website now defunct, a digital ghost town. I felt the wave of nausea so strong I had to put my head between my knees. This wasn't just mismanagement, it was a pathology, an addiction to the thrill of the big score, a desperate need to appear as a savvy, cutting-edge investor among her equally shallow social circle, to prove that her worldly knowledge was superior to our boring prudence. I cross-referenced the dates of these catastrophic withdrawals with their mortgage documents and Michael's stock option statements. The picture that emerged was devastatingly clear. She had been systematically liquidating his hard-earned vested stock, the bedrock of their financial security and the children's future, to feed this addiction. The beautiful house, the cars, the luxury lifestyle. It was all a magnificent house of cards built on a foundation of debt and delusion. They were one missed software bonus, one economic downturn away from financial collapse and foreclosure, and Michael, buried in his code, trusting and oblivious, was a king about to be toppled from a throne he didn't even know was made of sand. The prepackaged meals and the rigid minute-by-minute schedules weren't about excellence or providing the best for the children. They were about control, the last vestige of order she could impose in a life spinning into catastrophic, self-inflicted chaos. She was micromanaging their diets because she couldn't manage their debt. This is where my doing nothing became my greatest, most powerful strength. For the past 25 years since Author's life insurance payout, I had been quietly, consistently, and prudently investing. Not in flashy, risky ventures that promised the moon, but in boring, reliable things. I owned the Maple Street cottage and another small duplex outright. Their mortgages paid off years ago. I had a diversified portfolio of blue-chip stocks and municipal bonds. I lived well below my means in my paid-off house, driving my 10-year-old sedan and letting the relentless, magical power of compound interest work its quiet, patient magic. To Chloe, my life looked modest, almost impoverished. She had no idea that the woman she pitied, the one she thought was sitting in an empty house, had a net worth of just over $2.5 million. My wealth wasn't for show. It was a tool for security, for independence, for legacy. It was a shield, and I was about to use it as one. I had the resources. Now armed with the horrifying, incontrovertible truth, I had a moral imperative. During the children's nap times and late into the night while they slept the deep, untroubled sleep of the truly entertained and loved, I worked. At the same kitchen table where we had built our pizza masterpieces, I compiled a devastatingly clear and professional dossier. The printed bank statements, the investment records, the credit card bills. I included printouts of the news articles exposing VitaPure as a fraudulent scheme. I made simple charts showing the horrifying flow of money from Michael's stock sales into these financial black holes. It was a story of financial suicide told in the unassailable language of Times New Roman and Excel spreadsheets. Then I wrote a letter. It was not a letter of emotion, of how could you, or I'm so disappointed. It was one of cold, hard, brutal facts, and an even harder life-altering offer. I outlined their current financial position with the dispassionate clarity of an auditor presenting findings to a board of directors. I stated the two paths that lay before them with stark, unflinching honesty, and I laid out my terms. I included a copy of the deed to the Maple Street cottage, a charming, fully furnished 2-bedroom with a porch swing and a fenced-in yard where the children could actually play without supervision. It was my offer of salvation, a tangible safe harbor.
but it came with strings of steel, their financial freedom in exchange for their financial survival. The week flew by in a bittersweet blur of childish laughter and secret grim purpose. The day before Chloe and Michael returned, I took the children out for ice cream. Liam got a dairy-free sorbet, of course, and felt a profound sadness that this magical, transformative interlude was ending. The house was clean, the blanket fort dismantled, but the spirit of our week together lingered in the air, a ghost of happiness. But it was also a beginning, the calm before the storm I was about to unleash. When the Range Rover pulled into the driveway on Sunday evening, they were tanned and laden with woven bags and wooden carvings, souvenirs from a paradise built on a foundation of lies. Chloe's eyes behind oversized designer sunglasses immediately began their critical inventory of the house, cataloging any microscopic deviation from her perfect sterile order. The blanket fort was down, but a single cheerful crayon drawing from Sophie was taped to the refrigerator, a vibrant violation of the minimalist aesthetic. "Everything go okay?" she asked, her tone lilting upwards, implying she fully expected to find the place in shambles and the children feral. "It was wonderful," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "We had a truly lovely time." The children rushed to their father, talking over each other in an excited, jumbled symphony about the pizza, the kite, the library books, the blanket fort. Chloe's smile tightened into a thin, disapproving line. "Kites? At the park? I hope you use the SPF Lilam. You know how easily you burn. And Sophie, those books look, well, let's just say I'll find you some more challenging material." She picked up the book about the girl who befriends a ghost. Frivolous. "But it's about being brave and kind, Mom, like Grandma was when she told us the story about the bear in the campground." Sophie basked at me with unabashed admiration.
Chloe's eyes flicked to me, a flash of pure, unadulterated irritation in them. I had introduced an unpredictable, joyful variable into her controlled, joyless experiment. "Well, thank you for your help, Eleanor," she said, the dismissal clear in her voice as she started to usher the children toward the stairs, eager to reassert her control. "I'm sure you're eager to get back to your quiet little house and your routines." "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the room with a new, unfamiliar authority that made everyone, including Michael, stop and look at me. "Before I go, we need to talk. All of us. In the living room. Now." Michael looked puzzled, setting down his luggage. "Mom, is everything all right? You look so serious." "We're about to find out," I replied, my gaze steady and unblinking. We sat, Michael and Chloe on the large, white, uncomfortably pristine sofa, me in the single armchair opposite them, the vast glass coffee table a no man's land between us. I placed my simple, worn cloth tote bag on the glass surface, a stark contrast to the cold luxury around us. "Chloe," I began, my gaze locking with hers, refusing to let her look away. "Last week, in my kitchen, you told me I do nothing. You were profoundly mistaken. I have spent this week doing two very specific things. First, I was giving my grandchildren a week of unfiltered joy, creativity, and unconditional love. Something I fear is in critically short supply in this perfectly curated and, I suspect, deeply anxious house." She opened her mouth, a sharp retort ready on her lips, but I held up a single hand, and something in my expression, the steel, the absolute certainty, made her close it again with a soft click. "Second," I continued, my voice dropping into a lower, more dangerous register, the calm before the hurricane, "I was auditing your finances."
The color drained from Michael's face, leaving him ashen. Chloe's went from shocked pale to furious crimson in a heartbeat. "You did what?" she shrieked, lurching forward on the sofa. "You had no right! That is a criminal invasion of our privacy. Michael, are you hearing this? She's been snooping through our personal files." "I had every right," I said, my voice rising for the first time, sharp and clear as shattering crystal. I leaned forward, my own composure finally cracking, to reveal the tempered steel beneath. I had the right of a mother who will not stand by and watch her son be bled dry by a reckless and pathological gambler. The right of a grandmother who will not see her grandchildren's future sold for a handful of magic beans and a ticket to a 5-star ashram. I pulled out the first thick stack of papers and thrust them into Michael's limp, unresisting hands. "Look at it, Michael. Don't look away. Look at the evidence of what your wife has done." He took the papers, his hands trembling so badly the pages rattled. As he scanned the pages, his expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror, to a gut-wrenching realization of betrayal. "Chloe, the Bali trip was $20,000? What is this VitaPure? We lost $200,000? Our savings, the stock I vested last year, it's all gone? How is this possible? You told me we were building a nest egg." "It was an investment," she cried, her voice desperate and shrill, laced with panic. "You don't understand the modern market. It's volatile. She's an old woman who doesn't know what she's looking at. She's twisting it all to turn you against me. She's jealous." "It's all there in black and white," I said coldly, my voice cutting through her hysterics like a scalpel. The maxed-out credit cards, the worthless crypto, the sham startups that were exposed as frauds months ago. You haven't been investing, Chloe. You've been gambling with my family's security to feed your own ego and your insatiable need for a certain lifestyle. And you've lost. Spectacularly. The room erupted. Michael was on his feet, yelling, his voice cracking with the betrayal so profound it seemed to shake his very frame. "You lied to me for years. You told me we were doing great. You told me the investments were aggressive but solid. My God, Chloe, we're broke. We're worse than broke. We're drowning in debt." Chloe was sobbing now, but they were tears of rage and thwarted entitlement, not remorse. "How dare you? I built this life for us. You were happy to live in it. You were happy to drive the car and live in the house and enjoy the benefits. You never cared about the details. And you," she whirled on me, her face a contorted mask of pure hatred, "you meddling old witch. You couldn't stand that I had a life, that I was living while you just sat and decayed in your museum of a house. You're trying to destroy my family." It was a storm of their own making, a maelstrom of accusation, denial, and shattered illusions. I let it rage for a moment, a silent, immovable judge watching the defendants unravel before passing sentence. When I spoke again, my voice was calm, cutting through the chaos like a knife, commanding immediate silence. "Enough." The words, spoken softly but with immense, undeniable force, silenced them both. They both stared at me, panting, chests heaving, the truth of their situation finally dawning. "Here is the situation," I stated, as if reading from a clinical report. "You are functionally bankrupt. The mortgage on this house is unsustainable. Your debt is colossal, a mountain you cannot climb. You have two choices, and only two." I pulled out the two final documents from my bag and laid them side by side on the coffee table, the twin paths of their future laid bare. I pointed to the first, a thick sheaf of papers. Option A. This is a petition for me to be granted temporary financial power of attorney. Given the overwhelming, documented evidence of profound financial mismanagement and deliberate deception, a judge would grant it without hesitation. I would take complete control of your finances. We would sell this house immediately. You would use the proceeds to pay off your catastrophic debt. You would live on a strict austerity budget that I will design and monitor. Every dollar you spend will be accounted for. You will learn financial literacy from the ground up with me as your tutor. This would be a 3 to 5 year plan to rebuild from zero. It will be humiliating, difficult, and will feel like a prison sentence. Chloe looked at me as if I were insane. You are out of your mind. We would never, ever agree to that. That's slavery. It's monstrous. Then there is option B, I said, sliding the second document, a single powerful sheet and a small brass key across the cold glass tabletop. It landed with a soft, definitive click. This is the deed and key to the Maple Street cottage. It's mine. It's paid for. It's small, but it's clean, safe, and warm. If you voluntarily sign over financial control to me, you can move there, rent-free. It will be your home, a safe harbor while you rebuild your lives from the ground up. It's not a mansion. It doesn't have a sub-zero fridge or a soaking tub, but it has a solid roof, a future, and no debt collectors knocking at the door. It has a porch swing. I left the offer hang in the air, a life raft in a churning sea of their own creation. I looked directly at my son, my heart aching for him. The alternative, I said, my voice soft but merciless, is to refuse my help, to continue on your current path, clinging to the wreckage. That path leads directly to foreclosure, to debt collectors hounding you at your workplace, to public bankruptcy court, and to a financial stain that will follow you for a decade. You will lose everything, including eventually the respect of your children when they are old enough to understand what you've done. I stood up, my body aching with a profound fatigue that went bone deep. I had just laid siege to my son's life to save him from it. The choice is yours, Michael. You can choose the illusion of control and face certain humiliating ruin, or you can choose the humility of rescue and have a fighting chance at a real, honest future. You have 24 hours. I walked out of the living room, my shoulders straight, my head high. I found Sophie and Liam hiding on the stairs, their faces pale and scared, having heard the raised voices. I knelt and pulled them both into a long, tight, fierce hug, whispering that I loved them more than anything in the world and that none of this was their fault. Then, without looking back at the ruins of my son's beautiful, hollow palace, I walked out the door and drove home through the deepening twilight, my heart a battlefield of triumph and sorrow. The next 24 hours were an eternity. I didn't sleep. I paced my familiar living room, running my hands over the spines of my books for comfort, staring at Arthur's photograph, asking him silently if I had done the right thing. I wondered if I had been too harsh, if I had destroyed my relationship with my son forever, if the cost of saving him would be losing him. I had gambled too, but with the highest stakes imaginable, my family. At 6 p.m. the following evening, As the sun cast long golden shadows across my porch, my doorbell rang. My heart leaped into my throat. I opened the door. It was Michael, alone. He looked years older, his shoulders slumped in a posture of defeat I had never seen in him. But in his eyes, through the pain and exhaustion, I saw a flicker of the clear-eyed, honest boy I had raised. He didn't speak. He simply handed me the power of attorney document. On the signature line, his name was written in a firm, decisive script. Below it, on the witness line, was the signature of a notary public. He had made it legal. He had chosen the life raft. "It's done," he whispered, his voice raw and shredded from a day of unspeakable stress and painful conversation. "Chloe, she's gone. She packed a bag and went to her parents' house. She said she wouldn't be controlled or patronized by a meddling old witch. She said a lot of things." He broke down then right there on my doorstep, great heaving sobs racking his frame. I pulled him inside and into my arms, holding him as he cried, my own tears falling silently into his hair. He was my little boy again, heartbroken and lost in a world that had proven too cruel. "It's over now, my boy," I murmured, rocking him gently as I had when he was small. "The worst is over. The truth is out. We're going to fix this together." The months that followed were some of the most difficult yet most profoundly rewarding of my entire life. Chloe, from the safety of her parents' home, filed for divorce. The proceedings were bitter and acrimonious, filled with venomous accusations. Her lawyer fought hard, portraying me as a controlling, manipulative matriarch who had brainwashed her son.
But in the face of the financial dossier I presented to the court, a clear, unassailable, and devastating record of her reckless spending and deception, her claims for a large alimony and asset settlement were gutted. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, saw through the performance. Chloe received a small settlement, far less than she believed she was owed, and vanished from our lives, presumably to find another source to fund her endless fantasies. We sold the McMansion. It was a painful but cathartic process, a symbolic shedding of a skin that had been suffocating them. The proceeds, as I had predicted, were just enough to pay off the massive mortgage and their staggering consumer debt. They were left with nothing in the bank, but they were left with nothing, which was a vast, liberating improvement over being buried in negative millions. Michael, Sophie, and Liam moved into the Maple Street cottage. The adjustment was hard, a culture shock of the most fundamental kind. The space was small, the walls close. There was no granite, no home theater, no walk-in closets. The children had to share a room, their beds separated by a curtain. But a miracle began to happen, slowly and then all at once. Without the crushing, invisible pressure of debt and the exhausting, constant performance of wealth, Michael became lighter. The perpetual tension in his jaw eased. He played board games with the kids on the worn living room rug, his laughter real and unforced. He helped them with their homework at the small wooden kitchen table, patient and present. He started gardening with me on the weekends, his hands in the soil, learning the patience and delayed gratification I had always tried to teach him, seeing the direct result of his care in the tomatoes and zucchini that grew. I wasn't a tyrant with the budget. I was a teacher, just as I had been for 40 years. We sat down every Sunday with a simple spreadsheet and went over the week's expenses. We meal planned together, discovering the joy and creativity of cooking simple, nutritious, and inexpensive food.
We found free local activities for the kids, community center classes, park concerts, library reading hours. Freed from the rigid schedule of expensive, status-signaling enrichment activities, Sophie auditioned for a community theater group and discovered a roaring, undeniable passion for acting that lit her up from the inside out. Liam, inspired by our budgeting talks, started a lemonade stand with a friend and learned the real, tangible value of $1, of cost, of profit, and of the pride that comes from earning something yourself. Their laughter in the small fenced backyard was genuine, unfiltered by the silent, corrosive stress that had permeated their old, beautiful prison. My move had not been about punishment or revenge. It had been about salvation, pure and simple. I had gone from the grandmother who did nothing to the unwavering, solid pillar that held my family up when everything else crumbled around them. I had traded their gilded cage for a humble but wide-open, sun-drenched field where they could finally breathe and grow. One evening, about a year later, we were all sitting on the cottage's front porch, watching the fireflies blink their silent Morse code in the twilight. The scent of honeysuckle from the vine I'd planted hung heavy and sweet in the air. The kids were chasing the fireflies with mason jars, their shouts and laughter, a sweet, unorchestrated symphony. Michael was sipping iced tea beside me in a rocking chair, looking more at peace and grounded than I had seen him in a decade. "Mom," he said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never properly thanked you." "You don't have to, Michael. Seeing you and the kids like this, happy and real, it's all the thanks I'll ever need." "Yes, I do," he insisted, turning to look at me, his eyes clear and full of a love and respect I hadn't seen in years, not since the gloss of Chloe's world had dimmed his own light. "You didn't just save our money, you saved us. You saved me from a life of quiet desperation in a gilded prison, and you saved my children from growing up in a house built on lies, learning that their worth was measured in labels and appearances. You showed me what real strength looks like. It's not in a big house or a fancy car. It's in the courage to face the truth, no matter how painful, and the love to build something real and good and honest from the rubble." He reached into his pocket and handed me a small, wrapped box. Puzzled, I opened it. Inside, on a velvet cushion, was a shiny new key. He said, a small, genuine smile playing on his lips, "It's for the cottage. I had a copy made for you. This is your home, as much as it is ours, always. You are the foundation of this family, in every sense of the word. We never want you to feel like a guest here. You built this." Tears welled in my eyes, but they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy and fulfillment. I clutched the key in my hand, its metal warm from his pocket. It was more than a key. It was an acknowledgement, a symbol of a battle fought and won not with weapons, but with wisdom and love, of a family shattered and then healed, made whole and strong again on a foundation of truth. Chloe is out there somewhere, probably still chasing a mirage, believing that the next big thing, the next luxury experience, the next external validation will finally fill the void inside her. But here, on this modest porch, surrounded by the people I love, listening to the sounds of a genuine, uncurated, and deeply loved life, I have everything. So, to anyone who thinks you're not doing enough, who feels underestimated, who was told their quiet life amounts to nothing, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful moves are the ones no one sees coming. They are made in silence, planned with patience, and executed with love. Your greatest strength often lies in the very qualities others are foolish enough to mistake for weakness. Never, ever underestimate a grandmother's love, her hard-won wisdom, or her fierce, unbreakable will to protect her own.